Welcome everybody to the Occupy Fantasy NFL Week 6 Beyond the Model live Q&A. All your DFS plays, fantasy football, prop bets and survivor picks, all for the next 30 minutes or so or however long you all have questions. I am your host Moose at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here over at occupyfantasy.com. Alongside Brian at Brian Jester FF over on Twitter. He's the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. And Brian, how's it going?
What's up, Moose? Week 6. Good to be back. How you feeling?
Pretty good. We were talking a little before the stream. A new soda place opened up that just loads up your sodas with a bunch of sugar. So I'm wired up for this. So we're gonna have some great takes.
Very 50s outing for you. New soda joint
Yeah.
opened up down the street.
But yeah, so what is this show? This is the Beyond the Model show. We have our daily plug that's on the website. We also have our official recommendation and plays with our video that our NFL writer Chris Rooney has up on the channel. This just kind of contextualizes everything, that maybe some little pieces here or there that we missed. Answer questions. I know a lot of people that watch this have season long questions. We're here to talk about that. So literally, it's just talk about the week and answer your questions. I will preface by saying that if you do have like one-on-one questions or anything like that, just try and say what type it is. If it's DraftKings, FanDuel, season long, DFS, a prop bet, and then if it is like a DFS, what type of contest you're playing, or season long, if it's full PPR, etc., tight end premium. And I'll just start off with this, Brian. I know normally in the Discord you talk about you have like your long list of injuries. Doesn't seem too many big injuries today, but if you want to just give a quick 5 minute max talk about some of the injuries this week.
Sure, I'll just go game by game really quickly. Some of the most impactful injuries. Chicago is missing their starting free safety and their starting corner, so another bump for Jacksonville's passing game. Remember, they had the same basically situation with the opposing defense missing some guys last weekend. Trevor Lawrence threw for 300 yards. Brian Thomas went off. So let's see if they can repeat that. They might get Evan Ingram back. On Washington and Baltimore, Brian Robinson is extremely questionable. Didn't practice all week. It sounds more negative than it did last time. And he didn't give the thumbs up emoji tweet like he did the last time he was questionable. So have to think he might be out. Let's see here. Anything else that is looking impactful? Joe Mixon sounds like he's going to return. We'll monitor the activations today at 4 p.m. for Houston. Drake May starting that quarterback for New England, so that's interesting. Finally, everyone's been calling for that, so we finally get that. Ramondre Stevenson's out. Antonio Gibson will draw the start of running back for the Patriots. Lots of ins and outs for Tampa Bay. Mostly good news. They get back their offensive tackle Luke Godke. That's good. Rashad White's out. Bucky Irving. Everyone's been clamoring for Bucky
Yes.
running back one season. They get that this week. Derek Carr is out. Spencer Rattler, quarterback one. And Moose, just really quickly, I'll take a quick break. I know everyone could not wait until week 6 for 10% plus owned Spencer Rattler. And if you're saying who, it's very fair.
Yeah. And I did this is what the NFL is now. You just label it off random people that were on your NCAA 14 game, and now they're starting. But Brian, I want to talk about it, and I don't know if this is unique to us just because we are in the DMV area, but it's something that came off as one of my top DFS stacks in my personal rankings. I talked about them some, but this Commanders Ravens game, it seems like every single person that I've talked to is just like, this is going to be a high scoring game. Everyone's going to crush. You have to play these people. And I don't know if that's strictly just us being in the DMV, but I'm curious to get your take on that game.
Yeah, and it should be popular for good reason, right? Two good fantasy offenses. Jaden Daniels been playing out of his mind. The most interesting thing to me, at least as of our Saturday projected ownership, Jaden Daniels about half the ownership of Lamar Jackson, despite being higher and the number one ranked quarterback in our model this week. So I think that's the first leverage play in that game if we just play the Washington side instead of the Baltimore side. And you look at the pass catchers in this game. Terry McLaurin, underperforming wide receiver. He is 14% on DraftKings, 16% on FanDuel. Zay Flowers, not underperforming status, but also 10% plus owned. So Moose's game is not going to go under the radar. But I think there are enough other spots, tons of underperforming wide receivers to play low owned wideouts that I wouldn't be too scared of just because this game is chalky and expected to score a lot that we should steer away from it in our DFS tournaments.
Yeah, it's always difficult, two local teams. You kind of get like your own personal, just from talking to people around bias on a big popular game like this. Normally, commanders are just terrible, and you're like, oh yeah, I can play them
I
without
know.
any bias from people around me. But yeah, so it's definitely interesting to hear that. And the dot bets here is in the channel. He says mix is officially in, reported 2 minutes ago.
Oh, sweet. Okay, good. So, I mean, he'd come back to practice and then didn't, and then came back, and then came back, and there's optimism. So I guess he is officially in now. So Joe Mixon expect to get his normal workload this week. So fire him up. I can't imagine he's going to be too popular after missing this many games. So let's keep an eye on Joe Mixon as a tournament play. So that's interesting. And speaking of that, Moose Dot Bets, he did his betting show sponsored by Occupy Fantasy last night. So go check that out on his channel if you want some bets for this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely go check him out. Love watching his stuff. Brian, I wanted to ask you also another question. Again, if you guys are here and you have questions about stuff, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we're just going to be chit chatting here for a little bit, breaking down the slate. And primarily, I don't know. We're talking about some ownership here, and I know our ownership is still pretty preliminary here. But some of the guys at the top, normally it's like, one or two guys, or mostly maybe like one or two guys at each position is pretty relatively low owned. Model picks up on some high risk plays. But as I look more and more, it's like half and it's a lot of low owned guys at the top of the model. Um, I
Which
can understand that
position
for the first.
are you looking at right now?
So I'm looking at wide receiver. So you
Yeah, I
have
see Wicks high,
Wicks,
Shaheed, right?
Shaheed, all these people below 10%. And it's not like they're super expensive. Sometimes we have those really good players who are super expensive and they're low owned because it's hard to fit them in. But these are just some good people or decent plays that, aren't relatively expensive and low owned. That to my mind kind of screams this seems like a way more high risk week than low risk week for me.
I think so too. Wicks, so obviously disappointed everyone last week. Christian Watson may return. I mean, his dad seems to think so, despite his adversary Jesse Morse on Twitter thinking he won't be. So that was fun to see play out. But even if Watson is back, Wicks is going to play a decent amount, and he's underperforming. No one wants to play him after what he did last week. And Rashid Shaheed, no one wants to play him because now he no longer has Derek Carr, he has Spencer Radler. But Shaheed's still underperforming. Take that with a grain of salt with the new quarterback change. You can't expect the same amount of passing volume and efficiency there. But maybe it's a good thing. And I think most people might ask. We get questions like this sometimes. Like, well, Shaheed scored last week on a long touchdown. How is he still an underperforming wide receiver? When that happens, that means the dude he still hasn't. He should have been scoring a lot more points despite
Yeah.
the long touchdown.
Pretty much, yeah. And there's a whole big formula of it, but basically it's like opportunity. How often did he convert this opportunity? And if you take away the touchdown, you look at all his other opportunities, like did he convert what he would have expected to? And he didn't. So that kind of leads into the question here from Jake. He says, pay down a quarterback, May, Willis, Radler. Brian, that's a tough question for
Yeah, I
those
think there's
quarterbacks.
enough value everywhere that you don't have to do that. And Chris talked about this in the daily plug actually, because we have Jalen Hurts as the most popular projected quarterback as of Saturday afternoon. Lamar Jackson right behind him. Even Dak Prescott, who hasn't been getting a lot of steam this year, he's over 10% projected ownership as well. Fields behind him. I would get it. Yeah, we had the Bo Nix conversation last week. It actually paid off, right? I think he ran for a touchdown and threw for one or two. So we know when you play those types of quarterbacks, what the rest of your lineup can fit around you. I have no problem if you want to play Rattler with Shaheed, or you want to play Drake May with Jalen Polk. These are underperforming stacks with cheap quarterbacks. I like that as well. Who's the other one he mentioned?
Willis.
Yeah. So, oh yeah. Well, I assume he means Will Levis. $4,800 for Will Levis. You will certainly get your money's worth, good or bad. But $4,800, you will get your money's worth with Will Levis. So that is interesting as well. But we have so many guys in new roles that, especially at the running back position, that you don't necessarily have to pay down, right? Like we get Bucky Irving, who is 5,400 on DraftKings, going to be extremely popular. We have who else? Eckler potentially. If Brian Robinson now, Eckler tops our model, he's relatively cheap. Other cheap running backs in the mix. So I'm not sure you have to do it, but Moose, the new meta, we've talked about it many times. It is possible to do that if you jam the rest of your lineup, as long as you don't jam it with all high owned players.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, going back to we talked about the wide receivers being so low owned toward the top of our model. There's also some guys that are really popular, really good
Yep.
and expensive at the top model. So it's kind of conundrum. I wonder if more people are going to be trying that as well, where you see people like Godwin and CeeDee Lamb, who's going to be 20+% owned in our projections. What if there's something going on with that? So, yeah, interesting strategy. I probably won't be doing that. But the Spencer Rattler one kind of piques my curiosity.
I know it piques mine a little bit too, and it seems like a couple people in the chat at least like Drake May as well. Drake May is trying to find his price tag here.
I thought you were gonna say
Yeah,
bad.
5K. Oh no, well probably bad, but he's also 5K, so I get it.
Yeah.
Can run. We know he can run.
Mhm.
And Houston, if we want some more Drake May propaganda, I mean, the reason people tune into the show on Saturdays most is for the propaganda. And
Yes.
Houston is missing their outside corner, their rookie Kamari Lasser. They're also missing their starting safety, Jimmy Ward. So it's two secondary members missing for Houston. So if there's a better situation for Drake May, I can't find it in his debut. So look, we're finding reasons to play these cheap guys. So I don't mind. I know typically we'll say definitely don't do that. I think it's still not a possibility this week. So if you guys want to play your favorite cheap quarterback, I think Levis I would remove from the conversation. But again, the price tag is his argument. So that's one. Rattler cheap and has an underperforming stacking partner. Drake May cheap rushing upside, opposing defense has injuries, and he also has a cheap underperforming wide receiver himself in Jalen Polk. So lots of reasons to do it.
Yeah. And so, as Byron says here, he says my POV is ugly. By the way, I like Will Levis, so it seems like the chat's really liking Will Levis. Maybe he gets steamed a little bit.
Possible. I mean, what is our projected ownership on him? I can't imagine it's too high. Will Levis is
6%.
6% on DraftKings, so it's not like a completely unknown guy. And I imagine most that is mostly price tag driven.
Yeah, exactly. Some other stacks, Brian, I that kind of top my thing here is actually the opposite of that. It's that actually kind of on that same page actually. It's the Atlanta Carolina game. Andy Dalton's kind of high up in the model there a little bit. Um, he's what, fourth or fifth? Yeah, fifth. And then Kirk Cousins, he's got the swag surf with him, and he's not so far, still a little bit farther down the model, but kind of one of those, like, as you look in our model, you have your 7+ K guys, your 6+ K guys, and you have these super cheap guys. In that middle range, you still get some salary savings, and there are a lot of options, and there's some cheap options and stuff. So I like the Atlanta side more on this. You can do Pitts, you can do Drake London, you can do a bunch of different plays, kind of fit your lineup around that. Do you have any thoughts about that game?
Yeah, Chris and I were talking, I think in our staff chat the other day about this. It's like you look at what low risk contests will look at, and you look or will look like, and you look at where projected ownership is headed. And if we look at Atlanta and Carolina, I'm just looking at the receivers specifically right now. Drake London 24%, Deontay Johnson 23%, Darnell Mooney 18%, Ray McLeod 16%. So these are four receivers in the same game over 15% projected ownership. If we look at tight end, we actually have this is the ultimate who meme. Number one tight end in our model this week is Tavion Sanders, rookie tight end. That is crazy to look at. I had to make sure there was no error. It's true. Tommy Trimble's out, so he will be the starting tight end. Atlanta gives up points to tight ends. 6% projected ownership on DraftKings, so drawing a little bit of ownership himself. Kyle Pitts 5%, not much. But all this to say, Moose, when we have all these guys from the same game drawing ownership, but their quarterbacks are not, this is the perfect situation. Let's just slide in the quarterback and take advantage. And if the chalk is right, at least we get the correlated aspect with our quarterback as well.
And Brian, we talked about it last week. We were finding plays. This is going to be the new segment of the show. We're just finding plays where their Wikipedia profile picture was them in college when they really should be. Jatavion Sanders doesn't even have a profile picture, so
Now we're
he
okay. Now that's next level. Next level. So
it's absolutely next level. Yeah, I mean his article is just like, he played college and he got selected in the NFL. It's like 5 sentences long. So someone's got to bump that up after he
yeah,
scores
dude.
2 touchdowns. So yeah, $2,600 tight end, absolutely super cheap. Could be a perfect run back. Could be a perfect play. Yeah, I
And
that's
again,
definitely one of my top
we
picks.
like playing tight ends. We like playing tight ends with their quarterbacks and smaller GPPs as well for the
Mhm.
correlated aspect. So love that. And again, didn't even mention the running backs. Bijan and Chuba Hubbard both over 20% owned. So like every player in this game is over 20% owned. Yeah, Andy Dalton's 2% and Kirk Cousins is 6%. So let's just let's just play 7 guys from the same game. Let's tack it on. And let's get the quarterback with it.
Exactly. And speaking of Bijan, Jake asked the question here. He says everyone's on him. Is Algier playable at all?
No, it's just he just in showdown, sure, but like Algier's not playable. He just ruins Bijan, if that makes sense. Because we're not playing a backup who's going to get 12 touches. We're going to play starters. So, yes, Algier's cheaper, and maybe he like vultures a touchdown. Like the best case scenario for Algier outside of an injury is like 15 points maximum. We're not playing guys who have max ceilings of 15 points. So, but there's another question from Christy in here. I heard Bijan maybe heard. Is that true? He's off the injury report. So he does. I mean, everyone's banged up at this point in this season. So he had some injuries to designate a limited practice earlier in the week, but it's not enough to put his game in jeopardy. Still, most frustrating usage for Bijan fantasy rosters, managers, whatever. So I understand the hesitation in playing Bijan, maybe wanting to play Algier, but I think the biggest takeaway is if you're not sure about that or you're taken aback by it, just don't play Bijan Robinson at 25%
Mhm.
projected ownership.
Exactly, yeah. And a question here from Xavier: Jacobs, Terry, Tolbert, Sermon, or Bucky? One of these to the bench, please and thank you.
Got you. Xavier, just let us know what the scoring system is. I will happily answer that question for you. Just let me know the scoring system, and then I will get you an answer.
So Brian, I talked about one of the games that I liked, which is actually that Atlanta Carolina game. Anyone that's kind of sneaky on your radar that you want to talk about?
If I'm looking at my rankings, um, I was like, why? I forgot to erase one line for my rankings, and I had Green Bay and the Rams. I was like, that doesn't make sense. They don't play each other. Um, it's really the next step down. I think Philly and Cleveland is that sneaky stack, right? Hurts is popular, 15%. And at the top of the show, for those who missed it, I mentioned that Cleveland is without two of their secondary members, two of their safety and their corner. I think it's just the two safeties, and Denzel Ward's questionable, but I think he's going to play. But Jalen Hurts is popular. We look at the receivers; they get both AJ Brown and Devonta Smith back. Both of those guys, Moose. This is where the leverage comes in. They're 6% and 5% respectively. So we get guys returning from injury versus a defense missing multiple secondary members at low ownership. Four guys who are top 3 round draft picks in season-long leagues. So I think that's a sneaky stack. Is Hurts and actually pairing him with one of AJ Brown or Devonta Smith.
And in my rankings, Philly's in the top of the second tier for me, so they're up there. Cleveland not so much. I've been burned one too many times by Cleveland
Fair.
this season, so
Totally fair.
yeah, definitely. So Xavier says his bad full PPR for those people.
I guess it's probably Trey Sermon. I'm just looking here because you're playing Jacobs, you're playing Terry, you're playing Bucky. You didn't draft Bucky, and they're not going to start him the 1 week he's a starter. So it's between Tolbert and Sermon, and we like that Dallas game stack. Sermon has some playing time downside with Tyler Goodson there, so I would say bench Sermon of that group.
And another season long question here from John: non PPR flex options, Eckler, Wandale, or Goddard.
I think the next time a viewer or member spells Eckler's name correctly, it will be the first time in the history of the channel. And this is not a shot at John. Just no one, for whatever reason, they either put the C in there or they forget the extra E. So either way, we won't know John until we find out Brian Robinson's news. Hopefully, we find out at 4 p.m. or by 4 p.m. today Eastern. But if not, we'll find out in the overnight news from Schefter or Rappaport or Tom Pelissero or whatever. If Brian Robinson is out, then you play Eckler. If Robinson's in, I still see the path for Eckler there. But I think you'd probably in that case want to go Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to be basically the wide receiver one for Daniel Jones with Malik Neighbors out again. But let me get your take. Malik Neighbors concussed, didn't play last week, still dealing with some symptoms, obviously. So he's not going to play this week as well. Didn't pass the concussion protocol. Was seen at the Travis Scott concert this week during the
Yeah,
concussion protocol, and obviously, old school and maybe logical thinking is you probably don't want to be at a concert
especially a
with
Travis Scott
a
concert
concussion,
where there's like a
especially a Travis
billion,
Scott concert. However,
billion lights. Yeah.
I saw a tweet that said, "There's not a more wide receiver one personality trait than going to a Travis Scott concert during a concussion, and that's the guy you want as your wide receiver one." I can't argue with that as the counterpoint.
I mean, his tweet coming back when he scores 3 touchdowns his next game is going to be cue the. I can never remember who actually posted it. It's like your typical wide receiver tweet. Just cannot wait to quote
Oh
tweet that in a couple weeks when he's
yeah,
back. Assuming he doesn't go to the next Travis Scott concert.
I know. All right. Just want to get your take on that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, it's a terrible take, but I see where he's coming from. um, let's see here. Christy says, I'm taking Barkley and AJ, fading out Smitty. I love Smitty, but I like Barkley to catch some passes.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like, there's a tough situation to pin down. AJ Brown coming off the soft tissue injury, Devonta coming off the concussion, so less risk of re-injury generally. I'm not saying head injuries are like insignificant by any means, but less chance to like re-injure or re-aggravate an injury for Devonta Smith. But both guys are in play. AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and that's a personal choice. AJ Brown ranks a little higher in our model, so I have no problem if you want to play him over Devonta Smith.
And another question, season long question here from Bryce. He says, trade D Johnson, Downs, Bucky for MHH and Spears. I can afford the depth.
Basically, trading Deontay Johnson, Josh Downs, Bucky Irving for Marvin Harrison Jr., I assume, and Tajay Spears. Interesting. I mean, when it's kind of close, I don't have an immediate answer moves. I always like taking the side with two guys because then you get the extra roster spot to load up. So, yeah, I'll take the Marvin Harrison side. He's an underperforming wide receiver this week. So if you want to get that trade in before tomorrow, go ahead and do that. I think on paper the three side looks a lot better. So, but it's close enough for me. And Harrison, just think about it. I know we're past that week 4 mark, but if you said you could have traded those 3 guys for end of round 1 pick Marvin Harrison Jr., you're taking that. So I say you take Marvin Harrison Jr. and then you get the extra roster spot with the 3 for 2. So.
And a question here from Hawk Dark. He says, what's your thoughts on Wicks? He's popping at the top of the model for DraftKings GPPs. We talked a little bit about him, but do you like him as like a one-off play, Brian, or anything?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe that game is interesting to stack too. But either way, it's going to depend on Christian Watson's availability. He'll play some, but also I will say, like, even if Watson plays, it's not going to be a full go. It's going to be a wide receiver by committee. And if Watson plays, that's going to lower ownership on Wicks. So just understand that he is a very high risk, high reward play, but is a guy that should be getting an opportunity. The team has expressed full confidence in him, and our model is all in at his price tag. So that alone should give us enough reason to play him in GPPs.
Definitely. And so we got 7 minutes left or so. If you guys are still want your questions answered, go ahead and ask. If you want to say hello, you can do that as well. Or if you just want to listen, that's totally fine with me. If you did like the video, though, make sure you go ahead and hit the thumbs up, subscribe. We're doing these every week. We're also having other videos as well for the preview video. We're doing also underdog best ball streams as well. Doing some good shows over there on the alternate channel. Brian, I want to talk about one other thing that we normally do with the show. We talked about some low-owned guys at the top of the model, but the official question we do is the low-owned cheap plays. And so it's going to be $5,000 or less and less than 10% projected ownership on DraftKings. That gives you, I don't know, 20 or so people that's in our model. Not many of them look good. A couple of them look great, but who's going to score a touchdown out of that group?
It's got to be Jalen Polk, right? I mentioned it earlier with the Drake May stack. He is underperforming. Maybe the fact that we talk about situations changing to impact underperforming status. Maybe this is a situation they need with a quarterback upgrade. I said it a couple times already during the show. Houston missing multiple secondary members. Jalen Polk, the rookie connection. Let's get that going early with Drake May. I said Jalen Polk at 3,600 on DraftKings, 47 on a FanDuel, 3% and 1% respective projected ownership. Got to take advantage of that.
I gotta stay on brand and go with the other bad team that we're talking about here is the game that I like. Carolina, Jonathan Mingo, probably going to be no percent owned. 3,700 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel. Give me him to score a touchdown.
Hashtag no percent owned. I like that. He's in there. He's in the mix. Remember, Thielen's still on IR, so Mingo is able to get behind Deontay Johnson. If those guys can outscore or just catch a touchdown at cheaper price tags than Deontay, who's 20% owned, really good leverage in that game stack. I like that call moves.
And the question here from Byron. Oh, good.
I was just saying really quickly. I'm not going to actually, as a secondary pick, Lil Jordan Humphrey. Josh Reynolds hurt his finger or something, so he's getting surgery on that. He's going to be out this week. So LJH, Lil Jordan Humphrey, going to be the number 2 receiver for Denver. Devon Vele, who we like. You and I talked about seamlessly on N for a couple of weeks and just never got activated. He actually will be active this week, I promise, because Reynolds is out and Troy Franklin. So if you have a take one way or the other there, those of you watching, if you're a Denver fan or you've just been following, there's some opportunity in Denver with Josh Reynolds gone. So, and all these guys are super cheap.
You say that, but then the activation report is going to come out and it's going to be like, yeah, for some reason he's inactive. And just pull somebody up from the practice squad. A question here from Byron. He says, I love Josh Jacobs again this week in DFS. He was almost there for a big game last week. And Brian, I think he's like third or fourth in our model this week, something like that. He's down to like eighth. But he was a little bit higher up, went down a little bit. What are your thoughts on Josh Jacobs this week?
Yeah, we talk about underperforming wide receivers, and our guy Mike Clay over at ESPN posts the expected fantasy points report every week for every position, and you can just get a quick glance at what running backs are underperforming, and there are a variety of reasons for why they may be underperforming. But if I remember the chart correctly, Josh Jacobs is underperforming his expectation by like 10 or 15 points, and generally that regresses towards the means with touchdown. And yeah, Josh Jacobs due for a touchdown. I agree, Byron. The model's picking up on it as well as a top 8 play at under 10% projected ownership. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that play, Josh Jacobs. Yeah, that's a good one. You look for running backs who try to regress towards the mean, and Jacobs is near the top of the list.
And so we're going to be getting out of here pretty soon. So while I'm doing the outro, if you guys have any last questions, go ahead and get them in now. But I do want to say thank you everyone for joining the show, asking questions, listening, just being here always helps us out. Again, if you do like the video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. If you want to subscribe to see more videos like this, hit subscribe. If you have any comments, criticism, etc., something else that you want to see, go ahead and comment or say that below as well. We're always tailoring the show to you all, the viewers. If you want any more, we have our daily plug up. We have our video from Chris with our actual good plays at recommendations. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord to figure out how to get access to our Discord. Brian, a couple people actually took us up on the offer that just asked for the Discord link. We'll probably give it to you. So shout out to those couple people who've done that. So again, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Scroll down to the bottom and make sure you read. Figure out how to access our Discord. Really good. And UFC is coming here in a couple hours. Our Discord's also one of the best places to go ahead and sweat the fights. So if you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and check it out as well. Brian, any last thoughts before I take us out of here?
I don't think so. I don't think we'll see too many overnight reports. There aren't too many questionable key positional players. I'll post an injury report, upgrade, downgrade in Discord probably tonight. Chris will be back tomorrow morning in our Discord as well for his 10 a.m. live Q&A. Yeah, I think that does. Oh, just and one more push here. Did the showdown stream on Monday that got a lot of positive reception showing how to use our tools to build profitable showdown lineups. A lot of people loved that video. A lot of people got a lot out of it. So if you haven't watched it already, it's on our channel here on YouTube. It's also pinned to the top if you're subscribed to the channel. When you go to our channel, it's like the highlighted video or whatever. So go check it out if you're playing any showdowns tomorrow.
Perfect. And I have to end with these two questions. One first here from Steve. He says, on DraftKings, would you play Amari Cooper? I know Deshaun isn't doing well this year, but the Eagles secondary is weak. Are you up or down on Cooper?
I personally made Amari Cooper the cover boy of this video this week, underperforming 4% projected ownership. I mean, Deshaun's got to hit him by accident at least once, eventually. So I agree. I think this is the week. So Steve, I am in on Cooper. Love playing Amari Cooper this week.
And one of our favorite viewers here, JPT, Jean Paul, says, I just joined. Sorry if you answered this question. DraftKings main slate million to first. Favorite running back under 5K.
Interesting. Now we're getting deep into the weeds here. It's got it. So if Brian Robinson is out, the model is picking up on Jeremy McNichols at $4,500 in a game stack that we really like. He's number one if Brian Robinson is out. Emmanuel Wilson is sneaky if you want to pivot away from Josh Jacobs. I don't know if you need to do that. Who else?
So
Jaleel McLaughlin, 4,400.
Yeah.
Who else you got, Moose?
I was going to say Jaleel McLaughlin. I was just sorting by our projected weighted opportunities in our model. Scroll all the way to the right, basically a formula to determine rushes and targets, basically how often they're going to be involved in the game. And Jaleel leads the model or leads the projections on that at 4,400. I think he's only going to be 1% owned.
I'll give you one final play. It is for the best ball bros out there. It is Kamani Vidal. Gus Edwards is out this week. Vidal will be activated. Drafted him roughly 1 billion times throughout the entire summer. He'll finally at least get some points this week. 4K, min price, Kamani Vidal. Maybe that's your 0.01% answer there.
You're no percent. Yep. So
I
awesome. So yes, so that'll do it. Until next time, we'll be doing this show again next week. Make sure you go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Discord, all that stuff to figure out when we're going live next. Occupy Fantasy, Musa and Brian from OccupyFantasy.com. Have a good night. Good luck.
Peace.